I'm Adam Unger. I am a third generation toy lifer, executive, licensing kid, I guess, but now an adult who's grown through the business my whole life, third generation through it. And my company is called Evolution, and it's been around for almost 10 years. We are at the tip of the spear. We're a licensing agency that represents film, TV, and gaming properties and manages all their merchandise licensing and retail development. Some of the other core pieces of the business that we do is we do acquisitions for clients where we help them acquire licenses from the studios in LA and help their manufacturing with licensing services that we do. We also do a little bit of import consulting, and because I've been traveling to China for my whole life, I still help people with manufacturing and product development stuff.
It's interesting that you opened your company about 10 years ago as kind of YouTube became such an important media vehicle, as apps became something that were toyetic. Can you speak to us about new media licensing?
Well, I mean, I think it's just, at the end of the day, you know, it's just about eyeballs and where they're coming from. If they're not coming from TV and kids aren't watching as much TV, or they're looking at TV as the secondary option to looking at their tablet, it's still the same premise. It's just another place for kids to watch things. I mean, to me, I don't see it as any different. It's TV on your phone, it's TV here. It's all about developing something that's exciting, that people want to watch, and people are inspired to buy product for. And that's never changed. That whole aspirational core of what you're gonna, I mean, you can watch a show and love it, but does that mean you're gonna go to the store and buy the product for it? No, not everything has that pull. And you know, I think as the toy executives and licensing executives sort of continue to figure out different strategies, I mean, that word, that aspirational product is an important part of it, and developing aspirational characters, and whether they come from YouTube, whether it's a fun influencer that you love, that you think is funny and great and you want to buy stuff, you let him tell you what are the cool things, or her, what the items that you want, and they'll curate for you. It's all, you know, to me, it's always been the same. The product's going to be on the shelf. If it comes from a TV series, if it comes from a video game, if it comes from film, if it comes from an influencer, to me, it's still the same story. It's something cool that somebody wants, and are they aspirational? At the end of the day, the consumer will decide, and you'll know if your stuff is selling.
Yeah, no, that's spot on. I like how you don't see a difference. A lot of people, I think, treat new media as almost like a new science, but it's the same thing.
Right.
I like how you just simplify.
I was watching. I don't know. Somebody said something on Twitter that I thought was really funny. It was like a millennial kid that had found what he called physical media. Like, he's like, oh, I found this like DVD, and I was like, oh my God, physical media. Is that what my whole world? It's a physical media. I was like, is that a word? Somebody know? Like, that's what I've grown up with. Is that a record and a cassette and an 8-track and a DVD and a CD? These are called physical media now. Like, we're totally like, we're skipping an entire. My whole world is like, all that stuff is sort of past, and you know, I guess I'm a physical media kid now, and that's what I had, and now the rest of the world is going to be digital media. And so, listen, you know, people collect and love tangible. They like to hold things. I still can't stand reading news, you know, on a phone. I need a newspaper. I want to feel that, but I get it. I mean, they're all unnecessary. Like, I don't need to keep DVDs and CDs if I can keep it all on a single. You know, when I first got that iPod, whenever that was, and the first one, I had the first one, and I had 1,000 songs on it. I was just like, I'd come to people's houses with my cord and plug in and play all day. People just tripped out. I mean, nobody had it in New York. I think I somehow got it first. And the incredibleness of digital is so exciting. It's so amazing in our world. It's so great that kids can watch whatever they want, anytime they want. I mean, the whole thought of like getting up on Saturday morning early and having to go watch my shows because that was the only time they were on. Like, that was it. That was it. If you overslept and you missed your window and there was no Scooby-Doo, you were out. And your whole day is shot. And then you'd have to wait till the late afternoon to like maybe catch your Super Friends or whatever. And now the kids get anything they want anytime they want. Anything I bring up to my kids that I think is cool. Oh, you should watch Speed Racer. Like, what's Speed Racer? Boom, there it is. Like, all their episodes, they can watch them all in one shot.
What do you think is that, like, Friends and Parks and Rec and The Office are all leading the Netflix charts? What is it about that retro content, or the content of our?
Oh, it's not even retro, my God. It's like it's barely 10 years ago, right? But good stuff is good stuff. I mean, and you know, it doesn't matter what. If you're coming into the workforce now and you want to watch The Office, when you're out of the workforce and now you're like, you know, once you get past The Office and you're, you know, you're having kids and you're fighting through that world, there could be another Office called whatever it is, because that's the world you're in. But if you're coming into the business world now, The Office is it. If you're and Friends, that's your demographic, that's your age group. They're in there fighting, they're dating, they're going through it. Whether it's The Office or Friends, it's like it's you're coming into it. And I think the toy business does the same sort of thing. They try to play on that, which is these play patterns are never going away. Fun for us is going to be fun for them. It's going to be fun for the next generation, and try to hit those, you know, segments when kids are growing up and hitting the number. We talk about this all the time. Like, sometimes you're trying to get to an adult for their nostalgia so they can share it with their kids. And I remember, you know, trying to get like Cabbage Patch up and running again, and the boys from Play Along Toys, Jay and Charlie, they were doing Care Bears, and we'd looked at it because when it was the hottest, it was in '84 with Hasbro, and then 25 years later, you expect those kids that were 8 to be 30 something, and now they have kids. So you're trying to drill into like their nostalgia as parents and reintroducing their kids to it. And I think that is another trick inside of licensing in the toy business, that you're trying to find that magic again and get it at the right time in the sweet spot when the expendable money, kids have the income to get stuff they love, so they're 25 to 30, and they've got cash and they got a job and they can go spend whatever they want on collectibles. Or you get the mom that loves stuff, now she's a kid, she wants to introduce it. Same with the dad. So there's all these sort of tricks within licensing that you're trying to maneuver in and try to pull through to trigger somebody to do something. Trigger a dad to show their kid, trigger a mom to get into it with their kid. So I wouldn't call them tricks, but they're fun ways to sort of play the toy business and find a way to make some magic happen again.
This is going to be the last question, but it's a two-parter. As a toy industry lifer, what is your favorite toy? And did it ultimately help you define what Kid at Heart means to you?
Whew, I needed some prep for that one. My favorite toy. I mean, I have to say, as a kid, my favorite toy was like the G.I. Joe. Was just the dude with the beard and like the scar. I mean, I've almost become that guy now. As I'm saying this, I'm like, oh my God, I've become that guy. Yeah, just the beard and he had a scar and he was super tough, and I could, you know, I wish. Because games are so incredible right now. I mean, I can imagine, I try to get mad at my kids to play Fortnite all day long. I'm like, I would have been locked and loaded and just gripping into Fortnite myself as a kid, you know, playing Space Invaders and the garbage that we had. And so G.I. Joe, at least for me, was a way to like create those unique adventures by putting new stuff on him. So I had him in the pool and his goggles and his whole thing, and he's underwater rescue or fighting some shark, or pull him out and have the military side of it. So my vivid memories of pure imagination were either putting on the gear and fighting all the friends in the neighborhood, whether it's army, cowboys, Indians, like getting into it, just or swords and just getting after it, or by myself it was like G.I. Joe and like getting him into his cool stuff and then creating that play pattern. Now, you know, if I was a kid, I'd just be like, boop, put on my Xbox or PlayStation and just dig into an amazing world that you could never create on your own. So, you know, I get it. I don't have any thoughts of saying kids should have done it our way. It'd have been so much better if they could sit around with a toy and go like this. Like, no, you can jump into an entire universe by playing games that are just incredible and detailed and amazing. So I don't hearken for the older days. I think great stuff is still great. I mean, there's no reason why Lego won't go on forever and brands like that. My Lego box was, you know, this big, and I would just build and build, and I wasn't being told what to build. It was build your own thing, and so I think that part of it was something a little bit that was near and dear to me.
Amazing, man. Last question. What does Kid at Heart mean to you?
I mean, I think there's there's a lot of us that have been in this business for a long time that are still kids at heart. You have to think like a kid to be able to sell to a kid. You gotta live the life a little bit. I think you're sort of dragging it out of everybody, which is nice. You're trying to pull, what it is that got, all these people into the business, whether they stumbled into it or fell in love with it. It just means that you have to, despite all the pain of trying to produce a product in China and sell to a buyer who you should be selling to the consumer, but of course you got to get it to the buyer to get it to the consumer. You have to go through all these jumps to get this product done. I think at the end of the day, you still have to have that that inner child that when you put something out and it's gonna work, this kid's gonna like this, you're not phoning it in and just trying to make a product that's cheap and gets out there. The core people that are still driving this business on a day-to-day basis definitely still understand what it takes to what a kid wants and what they're going through in life, and to find something special for them. My grandfather was a rep in probably the 40s, selling and being a rep for the major toy companies like Empire Plastics and a bunch of those guys, and he was the West Coast rep. And so he's been selling toys, at least in the late 30s and 40s all the way through. And then there's a picture of my father and grandfather going to the New York Toy Fair in 1951 or something that I have, and that sort of is the impressed upon me. I think my first toy fair was 1991. So, 40, however many years later, I start going as well with my dad. And so, yeah, my father's been going to China since the 70s. My first trip to China was in the late 80s. So we've been in it for a long, long, long time. And
you grew up here in LA?
And all were in here in LA, yeah. My dad grew up here in West LA.
Your dad has a rep business now still, right?
My dad has, I wouldn't call it a rep business, it's mostly an import consulting business. So he's got clients, a handful of clients that he manages from his factory. He's got an agency in Hong Kong. And so they're helping produce products for mid-sized companies, and still doing some stuff with Disney every now and then. And then mostly his business is a lot of licensing acquisition, because he's here on the West Coast, and a lot of the same things that I do is helping manufacturers get licenses from the studios here domestically in LA.
So, Los Angeles has a big part in your career, or it plays a big role in your career. What is, there are more toy companies here than any other city in the world. Can you talk about the connection between the play industry and the entertainment industry?
When I started the business in the early 90s, there was nobody here. There was a handful. There was Mattel, and all the rest of the players here were distributors. So all the business, even the buyers, even the retailers, they were all everywhere else. So a lot of the repping and stuff I did in California was to Disneyland and Disney parks and Disney stores and some of the supermarket stores. All the big buyers were all everywhere but here. So most of the California business was not necessarily here, but you'd find all these great distributors that could buy a lot of products from you, and then they'd handle all the mom and pop stores. As far as the connection, the studios were here, but licensing, it wasn't necessarily a huge deal when I started. It was really about the toys. They were toy products, and then if you had a great toy, maybe you'd put some licensing on it to extend the life of the toy. And then slowly but surely the entertainment business started clued into sort of what was going on as far as making films and stuff that would drive toy products, and it started to ultimately happen, maybe with something like Batman. You started to see that red logo, the yellow logo across every T-shirt, and then you started to see toys and Star Wars, and all that was kind of happening, as the way licensing was really growing. But there wasn't really a big connection to California and the business outside of coming here just to go see the studios. Only Mattel was here at that time, so I always felt like we were always going somewhere. Like I never felt like it was all coming to me like, hey, I'm here in California, just like bring it on. I always felt like we were going to New York or going to this show or going to licensing show was in New York. Everything was across the way. So it's only until now, and it seems like a lot of the toy companies are here. It's not even their premier, it's not even their ultimate office. It's kind of their secondary office. So a lot of the toy companies are here, but it maybe isn't their first office. Even somebody like a Bandai, their main office in Japan, they got an office here, and a lot of these guys have an office here, but that doesn't mean the day-to-day business is happening in California. I think when the creative started coming over here is when things started to change, when all the real talent started working their way west, whether they were studio talent or design or graphic those guys all started coming to California, and you'll run into all these artists that they didn't start here. So once the talent started coming here, they would hire the talent to stay in California. They either work, a lot of guys have worked in studios and they've worked at toy companies. You see the Mattel and the Disney crossover. I mean, there's every single person has worked at one of those two that worked there. So then that's when it started to kind of intermingle a little bit over the last probably 25 years. And then toy companies started to, hey, we could be in LA, we're going to do so much business in LA, plus we're going to Hong Kong. Everybody's going to Hong Kong, and New York to Hong Kong is obviously a big pain. So slowly but surely things started working their way to the West Coast, and now it's a lot more valuable than it was. I mean, even LA, even the show here in October, it really hasn't been incredibly relevant. It's always been Mattel's show, right? I mean, and then we all went to Dallas. So California is just becoming important to the toy business. And it hasn't happened overnight. It's been a kind of a long time process.
So I would call you an expert in licensing. What are the licensing 101s for somebody who doesn't even understand what the term means? How does it all work?
Oh boy. I mean, it really is a means of, if you think of it the right way, to enhance a product that you have that's gonna build something either new or exciting by using a licensed brand. I think that's the core of it. You've got an item that's great, and you want to put new and exciting licenses on it so that it extends the brand and makes it more valuable across the way. What ultimately happens in some cases is that you're trying to build something specifically for a license, and if you don't have the license, it kind of makes or breaks the product, at least in the toy space anyway. That's where you can kind of run into issues. The goal is to sort of establish a toy line or a brand unto yourself and use licensing as a means to keep it relevant and growing. I think from our business perspective, sometimes we get a little trapped into licensing as the only means of differentiation from what's out there. You've got a figure, you've got a doll, you got a doll, but now you've got a license on it. That's what makes it great. And that's always, sort of the issue that you run into is if your brand can't stand alone without the license on it, and again, speaking from a toy perspective, you become a licensed commodity the other way. And you've got a big load of royalty inside of there that's different from your own toy brand, and you've got a lot of other battles. There's probably 20 other guys with the same license or gals with the same license that you have. You might have a different size or height or some sort of advantage you're trying to go through, but for me, I think the core of it really should be build something great, have it stand unto itself, and then from there take it and get some licenses on it to give it some depth and let it expand your retail space with licensing. Yeah,
that's great. I really like that you're saying that licensing isn't the shortcut. It's more of a sustainability idea. Like, create a great brand, make sure it plays well, make sure a kid really likes it, mom wants to buy it, build your campaign, and then license it out for 4, 5, 10 years, hopefully, that you can keep innovating and making something new.
Yeah, because if somebody can if you have is the customer coming to buy your brand, or are they coming to buy the brand that you're licensing? And you try to, right? It should be both. I mean, you should be able to build your brand and build a community and a following, and then be able to develop it out across different segments. You want to get a boys brand, you want to get a girls brand, or you want to get an older demo. Maybe you want a preschool brand, but your brand is the core, and everything else is sort of hopefully falling into that. And it doesn't really happen that way anymore. A lot of I guess the toy company stuff, it's not about, if it's Nerf, it's Nerf. Everybody knows Nerf. It's a Playmobil. And they have a license on it, great, but it's still Nerf and it's still Playmobil and it's still Lego, right? Some of these brands have been around forever and they've maintained that power. But everybody else, you're out there and it doesn't matter. You look at an action figure line, it doesn't matter if it's Mattel or if it's Hasbro or whoever, the kid's going to buy the line because it's based on their favorite character. And, I think what happens in today's world is what's going on is that the hottest brands aren't necessarily licensed in our toy business right now. You're thinking of LOL and Shopkins, and some of these brands are dominating the toy industry, and they're top 10 in every item. And you're looking at this stuff, some of the things that Moose is doing, and you look at these brands, the toy brands. They're the ones that are leading the charge right now. They're the ones that kids want, and they do not have licenses on them. And so I think all the toy companies are looking to build their own brand in that regard. If you're not, you really shouldn't be in the business. I mean, if you're not thinking about that right now, if not every toy executive is not thinking about, I need to get something that I can call my own and build a brand, and then I can go out and do licensing on my brand, which is obviously going to help tell this massive story. It's a big risk, you've got content, and you're basically got to build the user acquisition strategy, which is sort of a buzzword in digital, but in our world it's the same thing. You've got to bring eyeballs to your own brand versus waiting for Disney to do it for you. So there's a lot more risk, but there's a lot more reward, and you're starting to see these things starting to happen and growing in our business, which to me, being a toy lifer and been in it my whole life, I love seeing toy brands rise to the top and beat the licensing brands. Even though I'm core in the licensing business, I'm still a toy kid at heart. And so I love seeing the toy companies really roll up their sleeves and develop their own brands. It's impressive.